Hey guys, it's Elton here. So in this video I just want to have a chat about some of the challenges I've experienced thus far in my van life journey. So bear in mind I've only been doing this now for just over 5 months, so I'm not a veteran by any stretch of the imagination. However, I do feel, and specifically because my channel's kind of aimed at those people between 40 to 60, let's say, that this might be worthwhile and something just to consider if you are planning on the van lifestyle. So strictly speaking, van life means exactly that. You live your life in your van. This can get a bit confusing on places like Facebook, where you have van life groups, but the majority of people in those groups actually aren't van lifers. They are weekend campers. They are people who take their van out for a week at a time, but they live in a home, and therefore it can sometimes be a bit confusing when you get opinions from people who don't really understand what it's like to live in your van full time, and as a result I typically don't ask for much help and opinions in some of those groups. There are other groups where there are majority of the people in there are full-time van lifers, and typically the help and responses you get from there are a lot more viable and realistic as to what van life is really like. Because let's face it, if you own a home and you're only going out for weekends at a time, you don't really have to worry about how much power you get from your solar panels, because you just plug the van in when you get home. So there's a lot of things that part-time van lifers just don't really understand. So I'm going to go through a few of those in this video. Hopefully you find it of value, something to consider if you are planning on taking up the van life experience. One of the things I've learned very quickly is vehicle repair, and even the basics like an MOT, are a lot more complicated. The bigger your vehicle, the more complicated it is. So for example, I have a Heimer B564 1996. Actually, she is no bigger than a Sprinter long wheelbase van, so she's just under 6 meters long and 2.3 meters wide and 2.8 high. So if you look at the spec of a Mercedes Sprinter, she's actually a bit smaller. However, I still seem to have a lot of problems finding garages to work on her. So, if you're used to having a car, pretty much every garage in the country services and repairs cars. However, the bigger the car is, the heavier it is, the less garages you're going to find that will be able to work on it. So mine is rated at 3.5 ton. Still relatively small, I guess, because a lot of van lifers have vehicles bigger than that, up to 7.5 ton, some of them even bigger than that. But the heavier your vehicle, the less garages you're going to find who will be able to work on that vehicle, because majority of them don't have ramps big enough to take vehicles over 3.5 ton. In fact, many don't even have vehicles that take a 3.5 ton vehicle. So when I had my recent incident where a wheel fell off on the motorway after the RAC put it on, I will be creating another video about my court case with the RAC. It took me ages, like a week and a half, just to find a garage in the area who would actually work on the vehicle. I found around 15 garages at that point and found one, and they were about 20 odd miles away from my location. And that was for a replacement shock and a replacement exhaust. So what I would consider to be common stuff. It took me ages. I'm now at a campsite and I'm just figured out that I need to get a cam belt. So again, I got on the phones, looked on Google Maps to find people in the area on my route, and again, out of let's say 10 garages that I've called, I have had 6 of them flat out tell me they don't do timing belts on motorhomes. Fair enough. One of them said the soonest they could book the van in would be the 13th of February. Now, considering we are the 26th of January, I believe, that's over 2 weeks away. The other chap I found is booking in March. So I have found someone who will be able to do the repairs within the next week or so. They've quoted me £500 for a timing belt change, which seems rather expensive. But yeah, what you got to do if you don't have too much choice? So bear that in mind. Even MOTs, as I say, if the garage doesn't have a ramp capable of picking or lifting vehicles more than 2 tons, let's say, you may have a struggle. So bear that in mind, folks. When you're on the road and traveling around, you're not going to know the area typically. When you're a homeowner, you build relationships, you find a garage that you trust and keep taking your car to. Obviously, if you're in a van life, unless you go back to where you lived originally and use the same garages, you are going to be in unfamiliar territory and trying to find garages who are able to help and willing to work on your vehicle. So bear that in mind when considering what size of vehicle you want to opt for. As I say, over 7.5 ton, I'm imagining you're going to struggle even more than I am with the 3.5 ton vehicle. So yeah, bear that in mind. Bigger the vehicle, the more you're going to struggle to find people who are willing to work on it. The older the vehicle, again, the more struggle. I suppose for me, because I have a motorhome rather than a van conversion, that seems to put some garages off immediately, because apparently it's harder to get access to the engine on a Heimer vehicle. I mean, looking at my access to the engine and comparing that to a Sprinter access to the engine, I don't see much difference myself personally. But yeah, bear that in mind. Another thing I've noticed, is getting around. So typically at the moment I'm sticking to campsites simply because I'm of an age, people, where I really can't be doing with the daily stress or worry about where am I parking up tonight. Yes, there are free parking spots around the country, and in the winter, to be honest, it is fairly quiet. So many of those parking spots probably are available. However, I have a dog who needs to go out, etc. So I can't be stealthy because I have to keep going in and out the vehicle with him to take him out to do his business. And secondly, I read, being in van life groups on Facebook, etc., I see it a lot where people are woken up at stupid o'clock in the morning by, if you're lucky, police asking you to move on, or wardens. If you're not so lucky, it's people trying to break into your vehicle. So I typically stick to campsites now, just for the peace of mind, and especially in England. I think when I get to places like Wales, Scotland and abroad, where they are more welcoming to the travelling community, or van lifers or tourists in vans, I think I will wild park more often. But in England especially, and especially down here in the southwest, where they seem particularly against people in vans sleeping over in parking areas, etc., I just prefer to stay on campsites. Now, one of the problems I have is getting around the local area, because obviously as I said, my van is not huge. It's the same size as the Sprinter, so it's not that the van's too big and cumbersome to drive. But once you're pitched up, you typically settle in, put the table out, you put your laptop out, you put your work stuff out, you put your cooking utensils and everything out, and you kind of settle in. Because I typically stay on a site for about a week, 2 weeks sometimes, because it's a mix of work, tasks that I get done, and also then exploring the area, taking video, for you lovely people, so I can post that to YouTube and document it mainly for myself, but if you guys find any value from it, awesome. So every time, if I want to, for example, just pop down the shop, which is a mile or two away, it's not feasible. It's a pain in the rear end to have to batten down everything and secure the hatches, as it were, pack everything away so that I can drive off to the shop 2 miles down the road. At the moment, I've got a power assisted bicycle, and to be honest, it's quite cool. It's quite nice. I get around on it. I've the other day I went out and did about 12 miles of riding around the local area, exploring. However, obviously with a bicycle, it is limiting you. I'm quite happy doing 10-20 mile round trip, but it's time consuming, for one. Secondly, I haven't got a great back. I've injured my back many years ago, and I have lower back issues now as a result. Slip disc I had a couple of years ago. So long story short, if I carry things for prolonged periods, which I do obviously with my backpack, it contains all my camera gear and everything else, I struggle in the evening. And I found that the other day when I went out for that 12-14 mile journey, whilst I was cycling around, everything was fine. The next morning I woke up, my back was a bit stiff and a bit sore. So, if you're fit and young and healthy and no back issues, then a power assisted bike might be the answer for you. Or you might not want power assisted because you're that young and fit. But for me, I really can't be standing up in my seat anymore and pedaling up mountains and hillsides. So I've opted for the power assisted bicycle. Just put the power assistance on when needed. If it's a flat or gentle uphill incline, then I don't bother. But it's nice to have that power assistance there when I need it, so I just don't have to sweat, basically. However, even with the bicycle, I've found that it limits my exploration. Like I say, after 10-15 miles, my back starts taking strain. So I've actually made the decision that I'm going to look into getting a tow bar fitted to the van, and then get a side loading bike trailer. So a side loading bike trailer, you literally put the bike on from the side rather than that way onto it. It comes on this way, and what that means is that the footprint behind the van is quite small. So you get two variations of that. You get a bike carrier, which is actually they mount the carrier, the motorcycle carrier, to the chassis of the vehicle. If you go for that option, just make sure you're not going to exceed your rear axle limit. For me, for example, I can't go for that option because by putting the carrier on to the axle, obviously that's weight in itself, and then the bike that I'm looking at is going to be around 200 to 250 kgs, which will take my rear axle over the limit. So that's why I'm opting for the tow bar route, because obviously with the tow bar, you're not putting all that bike's weight onto the vehicle's rear axle itself. You're putting some weight through the tow bar head, but not the full 200 or 250 kilograms. And I'm opting for the side loading trailer because, as I said, the footprint behind the van is tiny. It's probably less than a meter that it extrudes from the rear of the vehicle. So as opposed to a normal bike trailer where you're looking at 3-4 meters possibly, and with a 6 meter vehicle already, I don't want to have another 4 meters behind me, making my vehicle 10 meters overall length, because that's really going to hamper parking up and things like that. But the main reason I've opted to now get the bike, a motorbike, is because I've made a decision where I will primarily stay on campsites. That means I can park the van up, decouple the trailer and take the bike off, and I can use the motorbike to go and explore the local area. And when I say local, obviously with a motorbike, 50 plus miles away is not going to be a problem when I have a motorbike. So it's going to free me up to go and explore more, be less painful on the back. I'll still use the bicycle just to maintain my fitness levels and to increase my fitness levels even. But the motorcycle will be used for shop runs and further exploring further afield. So just be, consider that. How are you going to get around? Are you going to use your van to pop down to a shop that's a mile or two away? Are you fit and healthy that you're happy to ride a bicycle for 20-50 miles? Or do you want to have something a bit nippier that you can kind of get yourself around? So consider that, as I say, it's not that the van isn't possible to drive the van down the shops or to go use the van to go and explore, but two things. One, it's not very cost effective from the fuel consumption point of view, and secondly, it's that tediousness of having to pack everything back away, secure everything so that you can actually drive off in your van and nothing's falling all over the place. The other thing that I've found that can be a bit tricky is doctors and dentists. So obviously when you're living in a home, you're registered with your local doctor and your GP and your dentist, and you call them up and book an appointment and you go. Very simple. On the road is obviously not that simple because, well, you're not near your GP or your dentist. So that's a bit tricky. So I know there are walk-in centres in the UK where you can literally just walk in and be checked out. I'm not sure at this point, and I will research, and I probably should have done that before I made this video, to be honest, but I'm not sure that there are dentistry walk-ins. I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, please do comment below, guys, because I'm learning as I go along here. So if you're a more experienced van lifer, or you just happen to work for a dentist, comment below and do let me know if it is possible, if there are walk-in dentists around the UK, and whether are NHS or private dentists. I'm assuming a private dentist you'll probably get more access to if you're willing to pay and can pay. But whether there are NHS dentists that are walk-in, I'm unsure at this point. But and the other thing is, if you're traveling with pets and they have long-term conditions like my dog does, is there are issues around prescriptions, because he's on medication, for example, that are scheduled medications, which means all of the online veterinary dispensaries require the original handwritten prescription. They won't accept an upload or a photocopy of the prescription. So I have to get my vet, who my dog is still registered with his vet. They have been kind enough to write a prescription and then post it off to one of these online dispensaries. So it's not impossible, but just bear that in mind. If you are traveling with a pet that needs medication, that are scheduled drugs, just have a chat with your vet before you set off. Tell them you're going to travel long term, indefinitely, whatever the case may be, and if they will be willing to give you 6-month prescriptions. My vet has agreed to writing 6-month prescriptions at a time, so I typically buy 6 months worth of tablets and medication for my dog at a time. Another thing to consider is laundry. So laundromats don't appear to be as common as they once were 5-10 years ago. Every time I get to a new campsite, I kind of check out the local area on Google to see if there are any laundromats around, and there aren't many left, people. Not in England anyway. Again, I can't speak for other countries at this point. I can only base my experience on the UK so far, England so far, and primarily the south of England. So again, one of the benefits for checking into a campsite every now and then is getting access to laundromats. So, for the most part, I tend to stick to the cheapest campsites I can find, and use those as a base. And then, as I say, I will cycle, or once I get the motorbike, I will then bike out and go explore the area. And typically, the more cheaper campsites, the little CL sites, the 5-pitch sites that you get with the Camping and Caravan Club, for example, they don't typically have laundromat services. Some of them don't even have showers and toilets, to be honest. So every now and then I'll just make sure that I book into a campsite that has a laundromat on site. It just makes it easier to get it done, because as I say, laundromats just don't seem to be around as much as they were a few years ago. So again, just something to factor into your planning. You know, if you are planning to wild camp and wild park primarily, you know, you are going to want to book into a campsite every now and then, whether it's just to have a nice power hot shower, or indeed get access to a laundromat to do all your laundry. There are these kind of, I don't know if you've seen these washing machines that look like a little drum with a handle on it. I wouldn't bother. I've had one before. You might as well just chuck your washing in the river and smack it against a few stones and see how it works. You're probably going to get better results, to be honest. But yeah, just bear that in mind. You know, plan for how you're going to get your laundry done. I know from seeing other van lifers who are touring in Europe, for example, saying that a lot of the airs, especially in France, you know, on the airs there are stacks of washing machines, coin operated washing machines. You just pop your clothes in and pop a coin in and done. If only the UK was so progressively forward thinking like that when it comes to tourism and traveling tourists, but sadly that's not the case. So yeah, just, you know, laundry is not as simple as when you live in a house, just walk downstairs, pop it in the washing machine and job is good. And you've got to hunt them down. So yeah, something else to think about. Another consideration is, if you're traveling alone especially, is loneliness and boredom. You know, it's all good and well on a nice decent day to head out and explore, and I do love doing that, and I do go out as, you know, if there's a fair weather day. Obviously it's winter at the moment, so it does get cold, but again, as long as the sun is out, I will layer up and I will head out and go and, you know, photograph and videograph the local areas. However, on the rainy or dull or just really shitty days where I can't be bothered to go out, it can get a little bit tedious sitting in your van when you are on your own. There's only so much Netflix you can watch. Other streaming services are obviously available. So yeah, I mean, personally I've got a few things that I've, you know, I entertain myself with. I blog a lot, I create videos, not that I hope they're worth my while, to be honest, and I play guitar, so I'll get the guitar out and try and learn a new song, or just try and improve my chord knowledge. Working on picking and that kind of stuff at the moment, it's a bit of a challenge. So, but even with those hobbies and interests, there are still times where I just feel like I'm bored out of my mind. You know, my dog Sharkhead, there's only so many conversations we can have. So yeah, just again, you know, just something to think about. Are you someone who enjoys your own company? Do you have hobbies and activities that can keep you occupied if you are kind of stuck in your van for a few days or a day or two? A few days. You know, obviously if you're traveling with a partner or your family, you're not going to have those issues typically. But yeah, if you are a solo traveler, it can get a bit lonely on the road. I typically go out and try and start up conversation with other people on the site. You know, some of them look at me like I'm a weirdo for talking to strangers. Other people are far more friendly, and, you know, will happily get into conversation. So yeah, you know, as long as you're an outgoing type of person, you'll find people on the sites to have a chat with. The other thing to consider is gas. If you have LPG gas, especially if you have the underslung tanks. So my vehicle has an underslung tank. I think it's 30 liters. It's great, you know, because it does in the summertime. It lasts 6-7 weeks because I'm just using the hob and the fridge typically. Then in the winter, if you're using the gas heating, it can last 2 weeks, 3 weeks if you're lucky. Obviously that's if you're using heating every day. When I'm on a campsite and I'm on electric hookup, I typically use an electric fan heater. But if you have an underslung tank, just be aware that there are limited number of garages in the UK that still have LPG pumps. So Shell used to have quite a few garages of Shell garages used to have LPG pumps, but they have, as a brand, have discontinued all their LPG pumps. So no Shell garages, as far as I'm aware, have an LPG pump now. So my habit that I've gotten into is basically every time I'm going to be near or going past a LPG service station, I will top up my tank. Whether I've just done it a week ago or it's been several weeks, I will just stop and pop it up, even if I have to take a slight detour to get there, because, as I say, there aren't that many around. Where I am at the moment, down in near Lymington in Hampshire, there's one, and that's covering a vast area in this area, and I think that one's about 20 miles away from me. So yeah, just if you do opt for the underslung option, just be mindful that there are fewer and fewer pumps nowadays to fill those underslung tanks. In hindsight, if I had built the van myself, I would probably have opted for bottles, because even a lot of campsites, you can swap your gas bottles on the campsites, and there are far more places and garages that do the bottles rather than have an actual LPG pump. So it's something I might look into doing over the spring/summer, is just adding bottle as a backup to my underslung tank. So I haven't looked into the details yet, but I'm thinking kind of a valve system on the bottom where I can switch between the underslung tank and a normal gas tank. So just to have that backup there should I run into problems and run out of gas while I'm on a site, especially during the winters. The last thing I need is to run out of gas and not be able to heat myself. So yeah, just another consideration if you are considering getting an underslung tank for your build or a vehicle that's already got one on it. There are, the number of pumps are depleting, and I think they will continue to deplete and go down in number as more and more garages kind of feel like the space could be used for better purposes, more income generating purposes, for example charging points. So bear that in mind. Just consider whether, if you do opt for an underslung tank, maybe just have a backup bottle and a way to kind of switch between the two. Okay folks, well, I hope that's given you something to think about. I'm trying my best to try and post on Mondays and Fridays. Obviously I've missed this week's Monday post, I do apologize, but typically the Monday post will be me doing this, sitting, talking to you, boring you out your mind, and just giving you some of my own experiences, hints and tips, and what I've learnt thus far on the road. There will be hints and tips, and I'll start showing you around the van and things like that, and a few hacks that I've come up with during my time in the van, which you might find useful. And then the Friday posts are going to be posts of what I've done for that week, since the last Friday post. So that will be video footage and images from my explorations, essentially. So yeah, I hope that's been informative. Please do subscribe to the channel. Please hit the like button below. Please comment, because I would love to hear from you guys, because I keep putting time and effort into making these videos, and then I don't get any comments. I'm not sure if anyone's actually watching them. And to those who have commented, Paul, Sasha, Dixie, love you guys, thank you so much. But I'd love to hear from some more of you people out there. All right everyone, until next time, have a good one. Cheers.